All right, welcome to Talking Investing. I'm Tom, and as always, this is not financial advice. Today I want to talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. We're going to go through all of our normal charts. We're going to talk about the long lull that we are having with Bitcoin right now, but we're also going to talk about what's going on with the Bitcoin miners because the Bitcoin miners have been taking off. So we're going to look at all of our charts. If you're new to the channel, we talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners all the time. So if you enjoy that content, please consider subscribing to the channel. We just reached 21,000 subscribers, so I want to thank everybody for that. Also, if everybody could please smash the like button, it helps the channel out a lot. All right, I'm going to start on a little bit of a different chart. I want to look at Bitcoin on the one-day time frame because I just want to take a big picture look at what Bitcoin is doing before we dig into what the Bitcoin miners are doing. This has been a strange year as far as Bitcoin versus the Bitcoin miners. Okay, so there's a blue line up here you're going to see, and this is basically an information line. It's 109 days long. So Bitcoin broke out back on February 28th. It got up to this just about $62,000. That was after a big run up. Since then, we have been trading in a range between 62,000 and basically just under 74,000. If I look at this trend line, you're going to see this is 109 days. So this is over 3.5 months of Bitcoin just trading up and down, basically sideways for the most part. This feels like an extreme amount of volatility, but we've really stayed within kind of a 20% range. So this is a massive period of consolidation for Bitcoin. Typically, what follows these periods is a big move in one direction or the other. Now, we're about 18 months into a Bitcoin bull market. We've had 20 to 23% pullback. So at some point, I do expect the bull market to continue, but of course, we could have a pullback in the middle. So please, everybody, remember, this is not financial advice. We're just taking a look at these charts, trying to figure out what's going on. But my point is, while Bitcoin has been consolidating for these months, the Bitcoin miners have had a very different journey this year. So I want to go over to the Bitcoin miners and go through all of our normal charts. I did do something different with these charts. I talked about the fact we've been following 19 Bitcoin miners for the last 3.5 years on this channel. I've now taken that down to 12 Bitcoin miners, and there's two groups of Bitcoin miners essentially. Of the 19, there's 7 that are basically microcap or nano cap stocks. Those 7 average a market cap of around $45 million. The 12 that I'm following have an average market cap of about $2 billion. You can see that 7 of these companies have basically, I don't want to say faded away, but they're of a different nature. So what we're doing is following the 12 large ones from this point forward. I've been asking everybody on the channel for the last several weeks which way they preferred, and I think the vast majority of people no longer care about those stocks. I will take a quick look at those on a separate chart just to show you which ones I'm talking about. So let's get to the charts. Okay, so this is week over week as of last Friday. So last week, you're going to see Bitcoin in yellow as always. Bitcoin was down 5%. So last week was a rough week for Bitcoin. Although, like I said, these moves up and down are still all within a very, very tight range. So Bitcoin has not left its range to the upside or the downside. But last week was another down week. But you're going to see whereas Bitcoin struggled and went down a little bit last week, the Bitcoin miners took off, and this is a continuation. The next chart we're going to look at is really going to show that and point out the incredible run some of these stocks have had over the last couple of months. But for now, just looking at last week, this is just the 1 week activity. BitTier was up 36% last week. Core Scientific was up 33%. Core Scientific, you're going to see, has basically tripled over the last couple of months. TeraWolf up 27%. Iris 26%. Remember, this is a week where Bitcoin was down 5%. So all 12 of the Bitcoin miners that I'm following now were all in the green last week. Marathon was only up 1%, so that is the largest Bitcoin miner by market cap, and they had the worst performance, but still 6% better than Bitcoin, which was down 5%. So most of these you're going to see had double-digit weeks. Most of these were up 20% or more last week. So a very, very strong week for the Bitcoin miners. Okay, this chart is a chart that we've been following basically since April 16th. April 16th, most of the Bitcoin miners hit a local bottom. We talked about it on that day and in the 2 or 3 days after that looked like a pretty clear local bottom. You never know if those are going to hold up for the long term, but it looked like a local bottom, and it seemed like the next move was up for the Bitcoin miners from there. And understand, as of April 16th, the Bitcoin miners were dramatically dramatically underperforming Bitcoin year to date. Bitcoin was up about 60% in the first 3.5 months of the year, and almost every single Bitcoin miner, 18 of the 19 we were following at that point, were in the red. Some of them were down 60% or more year to date, so things were not going well. That seemed to be the bottom. So this chart measures since that day. It's now basically 2 months later, and you're going to see every single one of the 12 Bitcoin miners are in the green, and some of them have gone pretty much ballistic. All of them significantly outperforming Bitcoin. So while Bitcoin is sideways up 4%, Core Scientific's up 290%. That's actually almost a quadruple. RIOT Energy is up 218%. That's a little bit more than a triple. This is, again, just in this 2-month period of time. TeraWulf up over 115%, so that's over a double. BitDeer just under a double. Bitfarms up 73%. So you can see a lot of these companies having big runs. It is worth noting the 3 largest Bitcoin miners by market cap are Marathon, Riot, and CleanSpark, and you'll see these all in a grouping right here. Marathon up 37%, Riot up 33%, and CleanSpark up 29%. So some of the other ones have been catching up to these top 3. I do want to point out, well, where on this chart CleanSpark looks like it's underperforming, that's only because it raced out ahead of all the other Bitcoin miners. This was the one stock as of April 16th that was in the green. So it's up 29% even from there. So this has been a very strong trend. We're 2 months into this trend, but I will say there's still a lot of volatilities. There still have been days in the middle where the Bitcoin miners had big red days, but those are being clearly counterbalanced by the days that they're having big green days. So I would just caution everybody, as I try to do, that these stocks are extremely volatile. So if a gigantic red day, if a day where your stock is down 10 or 12 or 15% is too disturbing, if that type of volatility is not what you're interested in, then these stocks are probably not the right stocks for you. I know particularly a lot of people that follow this channel and subscribe to this channel, we've talked about this for years, but I do still like to point this out for anybody that may be new to the channel or just starting to invest in these stocks. They are incredibly volatile. These are among the most volatile stocks. Bitcoin itself can be very volatile, and the Bitcoin mining stocks are even more volatile. But right now, for the last 2 months, we've been getting a gigantic push to the upside. So if we switch over to year to date, this is the chart I really want to look at. This chart 3.5 months into the year was a total disaster. Every single Bitcoin miner except for CleanSpark was down, and some of them, like I said, were down 40 or 50 or 60% year to date. So that's just 3.5 months into the year when Bitcoin was up 60%. Most of these stocks were way in the red. So you can see I've been talking all year about the fact that I did think these stocks would start to turn. We would start to get some of these back into the green. And over the last several weeks, we've really started to see some of these take off. We now have 4 Bitcoin miners that are actually outperforming Bitcoin year to date. Core Scientific's up 86% year to date. RIOT Energy's up 85% year to date. TeraWulf is up 63% year to date. All 3 of those passed CleanSpark. For the first basically 5 months of the year, CleanSpark was the best performing Bitcoin mining stock, and it was not even close. And now you can see these 3 companies have actually passed CleanSpark. Here's Bitcoin up 56%, and then you've got Cypher now in the green year to date, up 20%, and BitDeer last week on Friday went into the green, up 1%. Bitfarms was down just 1%, so that is very close to going green for the year. And then you're going to see a couple at about 15 or 17%, and then there's still 3 stocks that are down over 30%. RIOT's the 3rd largest market cap out of all the Bitcoin miners, and you can see against the other 2, it's really underperforming. Marathon, the largest by market cap, is also down 17%, so still not back to zero. I personally do believe that Marathon and Riot will have runs later in the year and in 2025, but of course, again, I have to say this is not financial advice. That's just my opinion. That's what has happened in previous cycles, somewhere 6 or 8 or 10 months after the halving is when Marathon and Riot took off in the last cycle. So we'll see if this cycle mimics the last cycle, but of course there's no guarantee of that. The other thing worth noting is some of these stocks down still over 30%, while Bitcoin is up 56%. I like to look at these and see, do these represent a potential opportunity? Because this is a gigantic discrepancy between the performance of Bitcoin and some of these Bitcoin miners. So is that deserved? Is that because the companies are not performing well, or are the stocks just not performing well? Sometimes the market takes a while to rotate into certain stocks. Not all of these move at the same time. And as you can see, the Bitcoin miners don't necessarily move in tandem with Bitcoin in the short term. Over longer periods of time, we have seen that, but in any given 1 month or 3 month window of time, Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners can do different things. And this year in particular, the first 3.5 months, Bitcoin was on fire and the Bitcoin miners were a disaster. And now the last 3.5 months, Bitcoin's been going sideways and the Bitcoin miners have been catching up in a big way. So just to take a quick look at the 7 stocks that I've taken off of this chart, these are basically the microcap and nano cap stocks. So again, whereas the 12 we're looking at have an average market cap of about $2 billion, these 7 on this page have an average market cap of about $45 million. So you can see those companies are anywhere from 20 to 50 or 60 times bigger than these companies, and that's why I've pulled them apart. And you can see all 7 of these companies are in the red, and some of these are significantly in the red. You've got Argo Blockchain and any down 66% on the year, where Bitcoin is up 56%. So I will just keep our eye on this chart and let you guys know what these smaller caps are doing, but I've pulled them out of the main charts because it seems like they're just crowding up those charts, and these 7 companies seem to be of a very different nature than the other 12 that we're following. So this is, again, just FYI, if anybody's interested in some of these microcap or nano cap stocks, this is what's going on year to date. Okay, then taking a look at all of the Bitcoin mining stocks versus November of 2021, that is when Bitcoin hit 69,000, which was its peak in the previous cycle. So since then, you're going to see right as of last Friday, Bitcoin was down 5%. So Bitcoin has been basically plus or minus of its previous all-time high, like we talked about for the last 3.5 months. At the same time, you're starting to see some of these companies catch up. Most of this list was down between 75 and 99%, and I still do have the nano cap stocks on this list, just to really point out the fact that you're going to see 4 of these stocks are down between 98 and 99%. So those are 4 that are the nano caps. The market has pretty much given up hope on these stocks. That doesn't mean that you have to. If you see a day trade or a swing trade, or if you think there's an opportunity in here, obviously do your own due diligence, and of course, buyer beware. Like we talked about, these are highly volatile stocks. But you'll see at the other end of this, Cleanspark's now only 25% away from its high in the previous cycle. And we have a couple others that are catching up. Cypher is now 50% away from its high from the previous cycle, which essentially means if Cypher doubles, it will be back to its previous all-time high. Iris Energy, the same thing, at 53%. If it pulls basically a double from here, it will be back to its previous all-time high. And these were stocks that were down 80 or 90% just 3 or 4 months ago. So a lot of these stocks are making progress. I've been talking about this chart, and 3 or 4 months ago, when this chart looked just horrendous, a lot of people were saying they did not want to see this chart anymore. I have kept this in here because I do think it's important to track this. I do believe that several of the Bitcoin mining companies will get back to their previous all-time high or beyond. Obviously, that's just my opinion, and I have to say not financial advice, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. But if Bitcoin continues to run, if Bitcoin has the bull run this time in this cycle, as it has in previous cycles, it's my expectation that some of these companies will go green, which means to do so, a lot of these companies need to do a 2x or a 3x or a 4x, some of them even a 5x from here to get back to their previous all-time highs. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on this chart. Lastly, to take a look at the overall market. Last week, we had some things perform very well and some other things have a pullback. The NASDAQ was up 5.7% last week, which is an unbelievably big move in 1 week for one of the major indexes. The NASDAQ did finish at its all-time high. The S&P 500 hit a new all-time high last week as well. That was up just under 3%. So you can see the NASDAQ and the S&P have been dominating. A lot of this is really due to a few stocks. There are now 3 stocks, Microsoft, Apple, and Nvidia, that are now over $3 trillion market cap stocks. Those stocks at those sizes, performing as strongly as they have been carrying the market up. But you're going to see when you get outside of that, the rest of the market did struggle last week. Silver was down 2%. The Russell 2000, which is the mid-cap and small-cap stocks, this was down 3.1%. This continues to dramatically lag the other indexes. Bitcoin was down 3%, and ETH was down almost 10%. So you can see the cryptocurrencies had a tough week. So really, it was just the S&P and the NASDAQ continue to rage, hit new all-time highs. Everything else has been struggling a little bit. But if we look year to date, you're going to see the cryptocurrencies still are out in front. Bitcoin up 55, just under 56%. Ethereum up 48%. Silver, even after last week's rough week, is up 24%, which is one of the best years silver's had in the last 2 decades. The NASDAQ up 17, almost 18% year to date. This is a big surprise. None of the big money had the NASDAQ and the S&P having a big year this year. A lot of them had it going sideways or maybe even going down. So far, year to date, the NASDAQ's up almost 18%. The S&P's up almost 14%. So that is extremely strong performance. Gold up 14%. So the Dow's up just a little. And then you'll see the outlier here in red year to date when everything else has been having such an unbelievably strong year. The Russell 2000 continues to underperform dramatically, down 1%. So that's what's going on big picture in the market, and that's what's going on with Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. Let me know your thoughts below. Let me know what you think about the new charts minus the 7 nano cap stocks. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.